And I'm Sharon.
I'm Christy.
So good to be back. We've been a little off. We're working on our consistency, but we've been out of town doing a bit of things. So,
Yeah.
it's just been doing some fun stuff.
Visiting friends.
Yeah, so we really, really like that. But, one of the things I want to talk about today is our beta waves. And I think it's something that, we really don't talk about. I mean, have you really heard a lot about it?
No, absolutely not. I didn't know anything about any of that until I started listening to some of our guided meditation stuff, where they were talking about brain waves and theta waves and delta waves and all of that. Didn't really think too much about that.
Well, and you also hear of that in the alpha wave, but it's not really often we talk about the beta wave, which is a place where a lot of people stay.
Right, which I'm learning because of a couple of books that we've been reading that there's some interesting information about that.
And you know what? I guess like when I was, and we love learning, which I love, but when you look at those things and it's like we stay so focused on one thing, we talk about when people get into that heightened thing, they have that cortisol dump and all of that, and then the sustainability of that. And it's just interesting to me that oftentimes we forget that other piece. There's so many components that are working internally with us.
Yeah, and what I'm realizing is the importance of understanding how it all works because it really gives us a better understanding about how our brain works, how we perceive things, and just what is going on internally that could really help us to make some meaningful change.
And I think the other thing is the more information we have, the better we are at changing something. Because I think when we don't realize there are multiple steps to change and to getting out of our way
Mhm.
of being those, whatever that success is that we're looking at.
Right.
If we look at, okay, well, I've got to stop the cortisol dump or I've got to do this, and not understanding that sometimes it's that when we stay in that beta, the beta wave it's a little more, I don't want to call it fragile, but it's a little more volatile. It's a little more movement in it and stuff like that. And so you combine that with the cortisol dump and all that. And then we wonder why things become so solidified in us.
Mhm. People understand a little bit about the chemicals that our brain produces and all of those things, but it's really a subject that I hadn't looked at and until I started reading into it and stuff.
As you've been learning that, what is it for you? What has that been, those aha moments or things like that?
It's helped me to have a better gauge when I'm feeling something, when I'm having a conversation with somebody and I am feeling just some kind of way about something. I realize that there are patterns that we build in reaction. And now, after doing some reading, I understand that that beta wave, we are kind of staying in survival mode, always coming from a place of like overthinking and just a heightened awareness to things. And yeah, it's been interesting.
I understand the whole part of the limbic system of our brain, which is our lizard brain, they call it, but it's also our fight or flight. And I get it. We need that. But I think it's so weird to me how sometimes I feel like people stay in that state so much of their life, or it's like in a 24-hour period, if you're staying in that fight or flight, with your beta, which is the beta and all that, if you're staying in that place,
Mhm.
how exhausting can that be?
But it's very exhausting. I think that's why people have so much angst in that. And we don't realize that that's what they're doing is they're maintaining that beta wave state. And when you're in that all of the time, it's such a heightened thing. It is draining.
I know, like for me, we're always talking about the journey and the personal growth and stuff like that. And I think it really causes me to have that introspection of paying attention, really paying attention. What's going on with me in those moments?
Well, people don't put a name to it because a lot of people don't understand about the beta wave part of it, but staying in that all of the time, it's really hard on the body.
And I think that's why whenever you see people and they have those times where they have that really, really, really high peak of emotion, what you'll find is when they crash, they're because they've sustained that at such a high intensity and that volatileness of it, that you're right, they're exhausted.
Mhm. And in that thinking mode like that, when we say fight or flight, it's not like you're being presented with
A tiger
a
coming at
tiger
you.
coming at you, yeah. But all of these things that we're combating, we feel like in life, we're trying to prevent this from happening or that. And we're just constantly staying in this place of trying to fix something and totally fixating on it. And it's not a healthy place for you to be.
Well, no, and I think when we also see that a lot is when we see people who are stuck in the past or so afraid of the future, in that stuck in the past or trying to change the past, which the last I checked, nobody's been able to do that.
Mhm.
We don't have time travel. We can't go back and we can't undo things. All we can do is in this present moment. How do we live in this moment, regardless of what those moments were? But so much of the time, that becomes that same place where we stay in that place of coulda, woulda, shoulda. And so it doesn't feel good, but it's at that, it keeps that thing, that instability. And then you have the so worried about the future
Mhm.
that it's creating such high levels of anxiety. And so a lot of people stay in a high level of anxiety about the future or that unknown.
Mhm.
But everything from the next moment is unknown. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
But I don't think they break it down into that fashion because they look at the bigger things maybe, if that makes sense.
Well, we're so tied to the emotion of things, and it was
Mhm.
interesting to me when I was reading about the beta waves and that kind of thing. One of the things that I read was that emotions are a record of the past.
Absolutely.
And when you look at things like that, then you can kind of understand that when you're reacting to something, which that's that beta wave, we're always in reaction to something happening extrinsically from us. We're so that emotion is so ingrained. We've learned it for so long. So we meet these encounters with the same pattern. We meet it with the same emotion that we always have, not analytically looking at it and saying, "Wait a minute, I need to pause here and realize that all of the stuff that's going on in the mind, all those chemicals that are being released in that, it's those records that we have gone off of from the past. If we want change, we have to look at it like that."
We have to change the recording, so to
Yeah,
speak.
yeah.
You know what's interesting is when you see oftentimes people ask the question, "Well, why do I keep picking the same person?" Because you keep doing the same behaviors.
Uh-huh.
And we don't realize the active participation that we have in those things. And it's the same thing. We stay in that heightened state with the beta wave and the cortisol that our body eventually craves more of it.
Yeah, we
So it's
gotta
very addictive.
yes, we're
Not a good one though.
no, but we are addicted to the comfort and what we know in our reactions. We go to the same thing every time because that's what the brain is used to.
I always go back to this client I had, and I listened to her response. She was in an abusive relationship. And I asked her one day, I said, all BS aside, why do you stay with him? And her response was, I know the asshole I'm married to. I know. So she knew the patterns. And she goes, I know them. She goes, what happens when I get with the next asshole? I won't know those. So there was comfort for her in knowing the pattern, not understanding to change the pattern. She had to change the concept that she was going to get with another
I
asshole.
was gonna say, yeah, she's tied to the thing that the next person is going to be that.
Yes, and not understanding. And then we worked, I said, well, what is your active participation in this? I said, you're sustaining this by staying in your pattern. So the pattern stays the same. We only break those patterns when we make a different choice or decision.
Mhm. It's like when we go into a conversation with somebody and we already think that we know what the other person is going to say. The minute you go into the conversation like that, you're gonna meet that person with the same confrontational feeling that you're expecting from them.
Well, and if it's the same conversation over and over and over again, guess what? If we're having a conversation and early on in our relationship, I think we did that.
Mhm.
It'd be like, "Oh, I know what she's going to say, but here I go. I'm going to say this. She's going to say that." And then I said the same thing, which then elicited the same response. But it
Exactly.
wasn't until I thought, no, I'm going to say something different. You did the same thing. We're going to say something different. And then that elicits a different response.
Yes.
It seems simple, but it's not as simple as we think because we get so used to that pattern.
Exactly.
We
Yeah.
get so used to it's kind of like you see those assembly line workers. It's like, after a while, they don't even think about it.
No.
You just do it.
Yeah.
Just do it. And then pretty soon, even in your sleep, you're doing the same patterns. So it's reinforcing not only in the daylight hours, you go to sleep and it's reinforcing it.
Mhm. People don't realize that you are exercising that response over and over and over again, and that's why you continue to on the same path.
I remember prior to being a therapist, I was many things, but I tested soils, asphalt, and concrete. And for soil, we did what was called a proctor. And used, I don't know how heavy the hammer was, but it's a hammer you drop down and you compact it in. You do it in 3 layers because you're trying to see where it's gonna break down and stuff like that. I would do that. It would become so monotonous with me, and I did the same exact thing. So my all of my stuff always looked the same because I was so in that thing of the same exact things.
Mhm.
And I did this, and say if I had a week of doing these, I would go to bed and I would still be doing that same I would still be trying to use my little hammer thing in my sleep. So that tells you how fast something is integrated into you.
Yeah.
I mean, that would freak I was there like, I'd wake up tired because I was working all night, you know? But those are just little examples and we don't even realize it.
Yeah.
And had I realized it, all I would have to do I finally did, I realized at work, do a little bit of that and go do something else, then come back to it, but don't finish my day with it
Mhm.
because then I was right, but I had to change that pattern because I was there like, "Oh my god, this is horrible. I'm working at work and I'm working at night." No, I didn't like it. But that's what I mean, how simple that pattern was to develop into and you think that is something that's not even something that really impacts you on that level,
Mhm.
other than impacting my sleep a little bit, but when we have these other patterns of communication that we get so caught up in,
Mhm.
that keeps us in those heightened states without and oftentimes I'll see that, I've had that in my past even when I would do it, where it's almost like you go in wanting the fight.
Yeah, because it's interesting that when you understand how the brain works and how it wants that comfort of what it knows and how you will stay in that, and it's almost like you're addicted to the fight of it. And when you can learn to recognize that, that's when you can actually start to make a change.
I think what's interesting is, when I work with people and they have or even our friends and they'll have a lot of drama in their life, and then when their life is kinda calm,
Mhm.
it's like you almost know, "Uh-huh, here comes the drama." And sometimes inadvertently, they'll create the drama because it's that knowing. And once again, that beta and cortisol have been activated and it just wants to keep going.
Mhm. And I think if you can understand that piece of it, that chemical piece of it, because it's the comfort of what the brain knows. So when you're saying that you want change or something and you get frustrated because you feel like you don't know how to make the change, once you start understanding those chemicals of the brain and what's happening on the backside, it really helps you to get a better understanding.
I agree. And I think that's the thing. The more we educate ourselves, because if I feel like something is outside of me, then I feel like I'm not going to have any control over it in the same way. And when we start to understand that we can move from out of the beta and the cortisol dumps and we have that power, then there's no excuse for it. Then we have to ask ourselves, why do I want to stay here? Once again, it's comfort there. I mean, there's probably a bajillion reasons. I don't know.
It's because those chemicals that are being released and you're familiar with, and that's what your brain wants to stay with.
And one of the things is that we get so caught up in those patterns. that when we don't understand it, or when we don't take that moment to understand, and there's many ways, I mean, really something as simple as meditation takes you out of that and into another, it calms that down.
Mhm.
Breathing, focusing on your breath, and it doesn't have to be anything that's 15, 20 minutes. It can be very fast that you can do that, or you take the brain to another part of the brain. So if you're in an emotional state, you take it to a logical state. I mean, there's all these little things where you do it through our senses, whatever that is. So it's not like it's something that's really difficult to do, but as I told my client, you've built up that muscle.
Years and years of practice of doing the same.
So we started out as a six pack, and then I said, no, now he just has a big old 26-inch python.
Yeah.
And I said, because you spend so much time building that. And it's not the emotion that holds us, it is the effect of that emotion on the beta and the cortisol.
Mhm.
So it is the beta and the cortisol that is the addiction. Whether and when I say that, I'm not saying that you're addicted to it, because there's no conscious awareness. Like if you go take a drug, it's a little bit different. But what happens is internally, the body is craving that because it's what it knows. It likes patterns.
Yeah.
It likes that pattern to stay the same. And then when we try to change that pattern, it wants to show itself in whatever avenue it can.
Mhm.
So to change that, to be aware of, oh my gosh, no, this is my body wanting this, but it's not healthy for me. I'm going to breathe, whatever it is. And then you go to that place of, and we had talked about this often, is what is it we want?
Yeah. Because 'Cause we're so fixated on what we don't want and worrying about it and thinking that it's somehow I don't know why we think that worrying is going to have some type of positive impact. It's not going to change anything.
It doesn't, but what it does is our brain, because it's working, it's thinking it's doing an action.
Yeah.
And the action is only internal to us. So we're having an action, all right,
Mhm.
but it's like that hamster on the wheel. It's just spinning. There is nothing's happening.
Mhm.
So worry gives us this idea that we are somehow in control of something. I know that's, I think, one of the hardest things for people to understand is that we do not control things externally to us. And I don't care who we are. I think that we will have those moments, maybe no matter how enlightened or transcendent or whatever blah, blah, we are, because of that the way we are as humans and our feelings towards other people and things like that,
Mhm.
that we will have those times where we will worry about something and we think, well, I'm worrying because I love them. No, we're worrying because we want to be able to change an outcome. Get it? In some ways, it helps you to feel powerful, but on the backside, it just makes you feel bad.
Right.
It's like this really weird relationship
I
to
think
me.
it's tearing you down. It's keeping you in that beta wave thing because you're trying to fix and it's not even reasonable, you
And
know?
usually, worry is the fear.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
fear is that thing, is our fight or flight mechanism and stuff like that. When we think about it, when we're afraid of something, the percentage of times that it's real fear is like 10% compared to the 90% that we create in our head.
Mhm.
But I don't think people want to sit there and say, oh, I'm the one who created this fear. And that's the hard part, I think, too. And I think it's always tricky trying to help somebody understand and then not to feel like it's a blame or it's anything like that. So it becomes it's such a fine, it's like you're doing this dance, okay? And you have to do it. It kind of starts out slow
Mhm.
in order to get the people in the rhythm of it, and then you can kind of speed it up. And then as your rhythm and as it becomes more comfortable, you can go faster.
Mhm.
And I think that's what it's kind of like, because talking to people about the fact that you are the creator of this. You don't want them to beat themselves up and think, "Oh, well, geez, here I am. I'm the one making myself this." Not understanding that not just you, we all do it. It's a human thing. It's not one person holds the title for this, so to speak,
Yeah.
you know? So it's kind of one of those things, and I think that we've been doing this dance for a little bit,
Yes.
but even every once in a while, you'll get that little misstep in there, and it's kinda like you have to do the reset, but you don't go beat yourself up for it.
Mhm.
You just realize, okay, for whatever reason, and I tell people you're going to have those missteps sometimes for things that are beyond your control. So, like our physical health, if we don't feel good,
Mhm.
sometimes we go to that place. If emotionally we're tired, we can go to that place.
Yeah.
Our hormones change, we can go to that place. And those are things that we sometimes don't realize, but if we pause and identify it, it's like, "Oh, crap, what's going on? Oh, you know what? I realize I have this kind of pressure headache. Maybe that's why I'm feeling s." But then once I identify that, then that helps me to get past it and to realize this is such a temporary thing. It's not somewhere that
Mhm.
I'm going to stay at,
Yeah.
you know?
Having the awareness is the first part of being able to change anything in our reaction or that. We're only in charge of us, and so our response is the only thing that we have the control over.
But don't you find even in that awareness and becoming aware that it's kinda like and part of awareness is being so truthful with oneself.
That's what's really, really hard because then
And
you
I
have to
think
have
yeah.
accountability w in your responses.
And I think that's the place that people struggle with because I think it's when you become accountable and if you do something and you've made a bad decision and maybe you've hurt somebody or whatever, and then there's guilt over that, and you just kind of go down this little rabbit hole. It's kind of like I think people go to extremes instead of, yeah, in this moment I did something I shouldn't have done.
Mhm.
But I think what they do is becomes that self-defeating thing, and then they start beating themselves up, and now that little thing becomes a big thing, and it's like this snowball effect that we do constantly in our heads.
Mhm. Well, we have to, like I say, take that accountability for what we contribute. When we're having an argument about something or that, and we just, it's sort of like I said earlier, when you go into the conversation thinking you know what the other person's going to say. So you're already putting out the energy that you're not going to like what the other person says. So you kind of just stay in that same argument each time.
Exactly, and I think I tell people, when you have those moments with people, go back and talk about it.
Hmm.
And the reason I say that, and like I said, when I work with kiddos especially, "Well, Miss Sharon, why are we talking about this?" And I said, "'Cause honey, there's a good chance it's gonna come up again."
Hmm.
But are you gonna handle it the same way, or are we gonna teach you how to handle it differently so we're not stuck in the same rut
Hmm.
of that? And we'll do that. If we have a disagreement about stuff, which we do, people
Hmm.
always ask me, "Do you 2 fight?" Well, we don't fight, we will have disagreements
Hmm.
because we're 2 different personalities,
Hmm.
and we have 2 different ideas, and we have 2 different histories and that have brought us to this place. But what we do, I think, really well is that we will go back and then have a conversation about that disagreement. Where could we have done something different? How could I have handled that differently?
Hmm.
And I think those are the things. But sometimes people think if I go back to it, it's just going to start it again. No, you go back with the intention of changing that. So you go back, if your intention is I'm going to do something different, that's already going to start. The beta waves not and the cortisol aren't ready to pounce.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, you have to go into it with the idea that you truly want to unpack that situation,
Mhm.
break it down and talk about it, and not come from a place of defending and feeling like that you need to speak louder or to be right.
Oh my goodness. The thing to be right.
Mhm.
You talk about something that keeps you in beta and cortisol dumps. It is that.
Yeah.
I gotta be right. And I always tell people there's multiple rights, there's multiple wrongs. But we get so fixated on our right that we don't understand that there can be another right, there can be multiple wrongs. It's this montage of things
Mhm.
that create our right and our wrongs. But people will fight for their what they believe is right. And sometimes it's a simple thing of saying, I understand why you would see it that way. I understand why that would make sense to you.
Or maybe you don't see why it would make sense to them, but if you are stuck on the thing of being right, you won't be able to hear them.
Mhm. And all of these things, you know, and I think starting to realize that all of these things are what keeps people in that area of the beta and the cortisol dumps.
Yeah.
And which is really interesting because, you know, one of the things people do, you know, if we're looking at the flip side of that, one of the things people do is they'll go out, they'll run, they'll do this, they'll do that, they'll listen to music, they'll all of these things that causes the dopamine and the adrenaline
Mm,
and that feel good kind of thing.
yeah.
And they know how to do that.
Mhm.
You know, if they feel bad, I'm going to go out for a run, and then, you know, they start to feel really good and that dopamine and adrenaline, and then
Yeah.
they come back, they're all happy. And they realize they have control of that, but they don't realize they have control of the other part of it.
Mhm.
If I can go and secrete dopamine by listening to some good music or having some good food or good conversation, whatever that is that causes your dopamine dump,
Mm.
you know that you have the power to go change the beta and the cortisol dumps.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because our brain is it's almost like our we get trained to I can make myself feel good, but or do the dopamine, but I don't know how to stop this. And it's the same thing. Here, it's the same technique when you start to identify that I'm in this beta and cortisol dump area. I don't want to be there anymore. Okay, stop, breathe, do something a little bit different. And you can change that.
And it does take time and practice to do that. And oftentimes you'll say about it's a matter of chipping away at that. And I think that's a perfect way to put it because even in your awareness to it, when you realize that you're having this really bad emotional reaction to something somebody said or done or whatever, it's so subtle when you can start to hone in on it and pick up on it within yourself. When you have that awareness to it, then, like I said, it's this subtle thing. So it takes time to be able to recognize it, to slowly be able to change it, because it does take a building of a muscle to strengthen that and change the response.
That's true. You know, when I was having this conversation, and what happens is a muscle, I called it a big block of ice that you put around you. The reason I said ice is because if you're standing on the outside, you're looking in and you can see yourself in there. There is the desire to be that person, but yet there is this big bunch of ice
Separation.
separating this wall
Yeah.
that's been put up that is usually that in this case, when we were talking, this particular person I was talking to, staying in that beta cortisol because of guilt, past this, that, or the other. A lot of the stuff I think comes out as a coping mechanism for for the situations we're in. But then what we do is we keep that coping mechanism and we keep feeding it. And then pretty soon, not understanding it doesn't work in all situations, but it doesn't matter because now it's there. So whether it's shutting off or shutting down or being angry all the time or whatever that negative thing is. But once again, I think as human beings, we're standing outside if you're looking in saying, that's me in there. I want to get to that person.
Mhm.
And that's what I tell him. You got this pick and you got to chip away. You got to chip away and you got to chip away. And as you're chipping away, you'll notice as you start looking at that person, you'll see fractures.
Mm.
And I think sometimes that's what the scary part is what are those fractures? And I tell people, it's not. It's because it's just it's almost like you're chipping away at those things that created this. And then once you chip away enough and you get it down, there you stand.
Yeah.
You know, that is you.
Mhm.
But once again, it's so hard to do that and understand that I tell clients when you come to me, if you've had 30 years of this, and I cannot help you fix this in 2 days or 3 sessions.
Right, because what you're
It'll happen
talking about
away.
yeah, what you're talking about is really rebuilding your whole personality in a sense, because you are altering your view of things, your perception, and what you thought was so important before is really, like I said, an emotional record from the past that keeps you tied to that same response.
Well, isn't it funny too? And I don't know, but it's kind of like when you get in these things and then you sit there and say, who was I before this? Whether it's a traumatic event or you just realize you're in this humdrum thing and you're not the happy person that you used to be or the outgoing person or whatever. And you sit there and say, because, like with you, it's so funny when you talk as a child, you were just a little,
Maybe a little ham when I was a kid.
because I love the story you just told me about you. You got to tell it.
Well, when I was a kid, I was way different in that I loved to reenact commercials and just, sing and dance and be that kinda out there little person. When I don't know, somewhere along the way, I clammed up and I was shy and I was afraid to get up in front of people. But I was telling you that one time, I think I was, like, in kinder or something like that, and the teacher had to leave the room, and she told the class we all had to sit there in our chairs quietly, and everybody was, and it was taking her a minute, and I don't know what possessed me, but I got up out of my chair and got in front of the whole entire class and did this whole dance. I don't know what that was about, but I had a good old time, and then I hurried up and ran back to my seat, and of course, some little kid in the class had to tell on me, so I got big trouble. But that's the kind of person that I was at that time, and I'm just kinda finding that person again and remembering that because like I said, had shut down and I was so quiet for so long. It's so funny to think that I would have a story even like that because, man, I have been like I told you, if I was entering a college course where I had to get up in front of the class to do something, I found that out, I was withdrawing because I did not want to be in front of a class.
So isn't it funny that somehow some event or whatever changed? I'm fortunate because I get to see that side of you. So you do goofy things. And I always tell you that's kind of what's cool about this relationship because sometimes I'm really goofy and child. Stop acting like a 6-year-old. No.
Finding my childlikeness again, so that's a wonderful
And
thing.
that's what it is. It's finding that child within us because you when you're kids, you don't think about how other people are looking at you.
Mm-mm.
You don't care.
It's not even
You
a thought.
do not. When you are a kid, and I'm talking about a kid just living their life, out playing, doing stuff, you don't go to that, the beta and the cortisol dumps.
Mm-mm.
You just stay a lot of the time. And when you get in trouble, you do, but it's like, oh, that's only gonna last 5 minutes. Okay, I'm off to play again. You forget about it very quickly.
Yeah.
And I always think if we could just get back more to that place where we forget and just live in the moment, be that kid,
Get up in front of the class and dance.
really. That's what I say.
You'll do
Dance like nobody's looking.
I did, I guess.
I love that because when we go out and we're watching people dance, and no matter how they're dancing, good, bad, ugly, I always love it because you can see that thing of I'm dancing. I don't care if anybody's looking because I am having the time of my life.
Mhm.
And that is what we have to get to. Those places where we stop with the being in the beta and in the cortisol, and we just start being in the moment and enjoying. So, hopefully people get out, dance in front of the classroom, take
Mhm.
those moments, enjoy, go to those places, shut that crap down,
The
you know?
music move you
Yes.
and
Yeah.
dance with reckless abandon.
Really, that's what we say. That's what we're recommending.
Yeah.
But no, and seriously, educate yourself on that. Educate yourself on you. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
What I'm telling you, it has been such a wonderful journey, and I love learning more about me. I love learning more about you and how we are on this journey. It's this amazing thing. It's not something to be afraid of, but it is something to embrace and to realize we can be whatever it is we want to be. Fun. We're not meant to stay in those levels. It ends our life earlier than it needs to. It creates problems with us.
Plays out physically on your body.
Yeah. So take that time,
Yeah.
dance, sing, tell a
Enjoy.
joke. I used to do that all the time with my clients. Is anything different? No. And when we would end, do you have a joke for me? They'd look at me, what? One kid did knock knock joke. It wasn't a very good knock knock joke, but I appreciated it. So anyway, we hope you enjoyed. And, we love just sharing our thoughts and our ideas. And, we're on this journey too.
Mhm.
And we love everybody that joins us on the journey. And if you would like to join us on the journey,
You can find us at twogirlsinapod.com. And if you've heard something that you like on this episode, please leave us some feedback. You can subscribe on the website and you will receive an email whenever we've uploaded a new episode. We appreciate any follows and likes that we get. We are on Instagram as well as Facebook as Two Girls in a Pod Life's Journey.
YouTube, Adventures of Two Girls in a Pod.
Yes,
Uh,
we include a few different things on there.
We're everywhere. So we appreciate you liking, sharing, all that other stuff. And we look forward to being back next week.
Yeah.
Laters.
Bye.
Good week. Bye.